1984 saw the release of a 6-part comic book story telling the exploits of Bucky O'Hare and his crew, who fight against the evil Toad Empire aboard their spaceship, the Righteous Indignation. Only running for 6 issues, the comic met with little success. That is until 1991, after Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles exploded onto the scene and everyone wanted cartoon anthropomorphic animals and the rights to sell toys based upon them. Was it finally Bucky's time to shine? The comic series was reprinted alongside a 13-episode cartoon, toys, obviously, and video games. All in all, 3 video games based on the franchise were released between 1991 and 1992, which I think is enough for a look at. Fire up your photon accelerators because it's a video game odyssey for Bucky O'Hare.
Bucky O'Hare! Bucky! That's Bucky! Bucky O'Hare! Let's croak us some toads!
Bucky O'Hare was co-created by writer Larry Hama and artist Michael Golden between 1977 and 1978. The series would not see publication, however, until 1984 as part of the anthology comic series Echo of Future Past. Appearing in 6 issues, the story is set in a parallel universe where anthropomorphic animals are fighting the evil Toad Empire, who have been brainwashed by an AI named Complex that they created. The United Animals Federation, UAF, counter this threat eventually by forming SPACE, or Sentient Protoplasm Against Colonial Encroachment, which is the most ambitious or biggest stretch for an anagram ever. This organisation is designed to counter the Toad threat, which is given a grand total of 3 ships, as seemingly the UAF would rather bicker amongst themselves rather than commit to do anything, as the comic takes a jab at diplomats. Bucky is joined on his crew by First Mate Jenny, a pilot who possesses mysterious magical powers, an ex-pirate named Deadeye Duck, android First Class Blinky, and Engineer Bruce, a Beetlejuicean berserker baboon, who are the only species that the Toad Empire fear. The comic opens with Bucky, his crew, and his ship, the Righteous Indignation, under fire, and their photon accelerator exploding, killing Bucky's chief engineer Bruce. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, a young boy named Willie DeWitt invents his own photon accelerator in his bedroom, as you do. This causes the 2 photon accelerators to sync up, and allows Willie to travel to Bucky's ship in another universe. Willie is drafted to fix Bucky's photon accelerator to allow their ship to escape the Toad threat. Back home, Willie's parents unwittingly turn off his photon accelerator, which traps him in Bucky's universe. Becoming the Righteous Indignation's chief engineer, he and the rest of the crew continue their war against the Toad Empire, or they would have anyway, but the comic ended after 6 issues and became mostly forgotten. In 1987, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic became licensed for a toy line, and on the back of that, an animated series was produced, as was the usual order of things of producing cartoons to promote toy sales. I don't need to tell you how much of an absolute success this turned out to be. Everyone wanted the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys, and the first 4 years of toy sales amount to over $1 billion in sales, only behind G.I. Joe and Star Wars in terms of toy sales in the US. With cartoon anthropomorphic animals being all the rage now, it was time for Bucky's triumphant return. In 1991, the original comics were reprinted, as well as a line of toys lined up to coincide with a cartoon series. The cartoon series, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, toned down the darker elements of the comics. For example, Bruce is not killed in the opening, but instead transported to another part of the universe by the malfunctioning photon accelerator. A new character, Bruiser, Bruce's brother, joins Bucky as a Marine. Bruce also appears in an episode of the cartoon in a half-material form, as it turns out he is transported to a planet halfway across the universe. Willie is also no longer trapped in Bucky's universe, and can go back and forth between Bucky's ship and his home at will. The cartoon also introduced the iconic villains Toadborg, a half-toad, half-robot character, as well as making the Toad Air Marshal a proper character in his own right. Hey, more characters means more toys, right? The first Bucky O'Hare video game appears in 1991 too, and it's a handheld LCD game made by Konami. In the game, you automatically scroll through the level as you shoot toads and dodge bullets. It's a fairly standard setup for these types of games. There are 2 types of levels. In the first level, you play as Bucky O'Hare walking along and blasting anything that moves. In the second level, you play as Deadeye Duck in space, shooting toad ships and asteroids. At the end of every Bucky O'Hare level, you get a boss in the form of one of the villains from the show. Alna Gator, the sleazy mercenary, the Toad Air Marshal, and finally, Toadborg. The Deadeye levels just have Toad motherships to defeat at the end, and can easily be completed by just mashing the fire button. This feels like one of the easier LCD games to beat. Don't get me wrong, it's still tough, but it only has 6 levels, and the gameplay is fairly simple. There is an issue when sometimes you'll get a bullet in the air and the ground at the same time, which means you can't jump or duck to avoid it, but other than that it's just a matter of timing when to jump into the air and when to stay on the ground. Having the villains from the cartoon as unique bosses also gives you some motivation to get through it to see them. It is ultimately, though, just a bare-bones LCD game like many that you've seen before. In 1992, Konami also released Bucky O'Hare for the NES. This is probably the video game that is most associated with the franchise. The game opens up with Bucky's crew being captured by the Toads and held on 4 separate planets. Blinky is held on the green planet, Deadeye on the red planet, Jenny on the blue planet, and Willy is imprisoned on the yellow planet. Bruiser is conspicuously absent from the game entirely for whatever reason. Playing as Bucky, you have to go through each planet and free your crewmate, and when you do, you can unlock them as playable characters. You can switch to it any time by using the select button. Each character has their own special ability too. Bucky has a high jump, Blinky has a booster pack to fly, Jenny has an energy ball attack you can control, Deadeye Duck can climb walls, and Willy has a powerful piercing laser. You can technically rescue the characters in any order, although you'll have trouble getting through the blue planet without Blinky, whose weapon can destroy ice blocks. After you rescue all your crew, you are immediately captured again, well done crew, and taken prisoner aboard the Toad mothership. The next 4 levels have you going through the mothership to destroy it from the inside, and you'll have to rescue and defeat your crew, as they have all been brainwashed other than Bucky and Blinky. The game's a pretty solid platformer with plenty of shooting and jumping. The difficulty is a bit of an odd one. The difficulty is hardly ever a matter of skill. It's about learning about where to jump, fall, and when your enemies spawn. There's hardly any random elements, so it is just a case of dying a lot while you memorise the levels. The fact that you have unlimited continues that start you off at regular acts throughout the levels means you don't have too far to backtrack, and progress is steady. The bosses too, for the most part, didn't pose too much of a challenge, and their patterns are quick to adapt to. The only real part that requires more skill is the final bosses. The penultimate boss is a huge ship that requires you to destroy all of its different parts, moving around the ship to target these specific parts. It's a long battle which doesn't allow you to make many mistakes, but again it's not too bad once you work it out. The last battle has you fleeing the exploding mothership while fighting the Toad Air Marshal, which requires a lot of quick thinking and shooting. The game ends with you fleeing the exploding mothership as the Toad Wars go on. Not a huge victory, but I suppose they were expecting the cartoon series to finally end the story itself. As far as NES platformers go, it's a fairly solid addition to the console's library. There's a decent amount of variety to the levels, although most of it does feel like it has already been done by the Mega Man games. Having the 5 playable characters is cool, and their different abilities require some thought as to who is the best to get through certain parts of the level, although it's usually Blinky. The gameplay style of having to die repeatedly to learn a level's specific patterns and sequences might not be to everyone's tastes, but the game does account for that with unlimited continues and frequent checkpoints. By the time I had figured out how to defeat the ship boss and somewhat learned the patterns for the final boss and beat the game, I did feel like it was a rewarding experience to play through. After the release of the NES game, the franchise just stopped. The toy line was abruptly cancelled after the first wave was released, the cartoon series was cancelled after just 13 episodes, and that was seemingly the end of it. Obviously, low sales from the toys was the primary reason for the franchise being dumped. A lot of the blame seems to be placed on the poor marketing of the franchise, but I think there's a bit more to it. Obviously, it has to be compared to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and its success, and nothing was as successful as them. But I think Bucky O'Hare just didn't have similar mainstream appeal. The Turtles were advertised as cool, radical dudes that used cool lingo with a radical attitude, I guess. The 90s were a hell of a time. Bucky was inherently more sci-fi based and perhaps didn't shake its geeky foundations to gain a more widespread appeal. There's not much super cool language in Bucky O'Hare, and Bucky himself is more of a soft-spoken hero who often gets tangled up in bureaucracy and diplomatic bickering when he should be fighting toads. The human insert character, Willie DeWitt, is also a nerd with his big glasses and enthusiasm for science, which again wouldn't have cut through to a more mainstream demographic of young boys in the 90s. I doubt kids in the playground were fighting over who got to be Willie DeWitt. So yes, the franchise met an abrupt and sad end, but it would have a swan song in the form of the final video game, Bucky O'Hare, an arcade game from 1992. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up style game, but with guns, so I guess it's a run and gun? I don't know. Either way, playable with 1 to 4 people, players can choose from Bucky, Deadeye, Jenny, or Blinky, and have to shoot their way through 8 stages. The gameplay is a lot of shooting and jumping, as the toads come at you thick and fast. Hey, is that a knife? Jeez, they certainly didn't show that in the cartoon. Each character also has a special attack, used by pressing the attack and jump buttons at the same time, which is pretty OP. The most notable thing about this game though is the story. It feels like an episode of the cartoon, and acts as a closure to the story, since as mentioned the series was cancelled by this point. Bucky and his crew learn that the Toad Empire is draining the planetary life force through all the planets in the UAF, and visits a race of psychic rodents to learn how to stop them, the same race that actually appeared in the comics. The crew eventually make it to the Toadstar, where they finally face off against the evil Toad AI complex, defeating him and saving the galaxy. What makes this really special though, is that they get the entire voice cast from the cartoon back for the cutscenes in the game. The heroes, villains, everyone. Even Bruiser finally shows up in a game.
Slithering pack of belt bums? Look at them, mateys!
How can they do such a thing?
Nothing in the universe will be safe from those wart-brain toads. Attention all hands, battle stations. Let's croak some toadies!
Wow, take a look out there! That's a climate converter!
The talons of toad form! I'll skin your hides, filthy mammals! Let's go fight awards off a few dozen more of them fly-munching toadies! I'll atomize mammal mush and mangle their mammal bones!
Them lousy toads just keep coming, Captain. What are we gonna do?
Observe, most gracious Captain Bucky O'Hare, sir. That's the planetary life source that Rodent, the old mouse, was talking about.
The only thing they don't have is Complex's image for some reason. Being that the cartoon had been cancelled at this point, this is especially significant, making the game feel like a proper ending for the series. Props to the developers for this. Throughout the levels, you'll face off against familiar faces including Al Negator, as well as Toadborg and the Air Marshal, both of whom seemingly are killed in explosions after you defeat them. Again, couldn't get away with that in the cartoon. It's a decent side-scrolling run and gun whatever that does have that tricky and sometimes annoying arcade difficulty designed to eat up all your coins, but it really is essential for fans of the franchise. However, despite being a pretty big success when the game was released, sadly it never got a home release. So there you go, that's every Bucky O'Hare game ever released. Just 3 games in the space of 2 years. The handheld LCD game is an LCD game, there's not much else to say. The NES game doesn't add much to the franchise, but is a good platformer that is fun and rewarding to play through. The arcade game gives the story closure, and you can appreciate the effort that has gone into it, even if the gameplay is sometimes a bit overwhelming with all the enemies on screen. After the arcade game, the series really did retreat into the wilderness. There was a concept pilot show that showed up in 2006, at the same time rumours of a new CG movie or series was being made, but it's not really clear if the footage was fan-made or had any association to those rumours or not. 2017 saw the rights to the toys being acquired by Boss Fight Studio, who released a bunch of toys based on the franchise until 2022. There's nothing concrete on the horizon for the future of the franchise, but maybe one day we'll get to return to the Aniverse to once again croak us some toads aboard the righteous indignation. Thanks for checking out this video game Odyssey 4, Bucky O'Hare. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel, it really helps. You can also check out my Twitch channel, where I played through all of the games featured in this video live, as well as support the channel on Patreon for as little as £1 per month. These playthroughs are also available on the Archive YouTube channel. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you for the next Video Game Odyssey.